Hey guys, so today we are doing a little bit of beach cleanup and we are going to work with several beach images. I'm going to teach you guys how to clone items. I'm going to teach you how to get rid of something, how to adjust the coloring on a picture. So you're going to want to go to the folder called Beach Cleanup. Now I am at home, so this is not where you are. You're going to go down to the V drive, which obviously I can't get to because I'm not on the network. You're going to go to the ME2 folder, and then you're going to look for Resources for Class and click on Beach Cleanup. Inside there are 3 pictures I want you to open. So if you click one, and you hold down the Shift key, you can choose all 3 of them and either drag them into Photoshop or go to File, Open in Photoshop and open them that way. Okay, so right now we have 3. We have an underexposed beach photo, we have a busy beach photo, and we have an beach umbrella photo. All right, so we've got 3 different photos and I'm going to show you some tools for you to use. All right, now I purposely left some of this on here. I'm going to show you how you can get rid of it, how you can crop it out. But to get started, let's start with the underexposed beach photo. Click on that. First thing I want to show you is the crop tool. Most of you have used this crop tool before. By the way, do this first. Go to Window, Workspace, and go to Reset Essentials. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. You should now have all of this up here and nothing looks off, and it should look just like mine, which will help you quite a bit. All right, so I'm on the crop tool. If you right click, you notice that you have some other options in here. We don't really need to get into these right now. Let's just stick to the crop tool. Right now mine is set to 8:10 with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. That's pretty good, except this is a landscape image, not a portrait. So an easy way to do that is if I click right here, it reverses it and it turns it this way. You see a grid when you use the crop tool, and that's because there's something called the rule of thirds. We will talk about that later. That usually goes with photography or with designing. As of right now, what I want to do is I really just want to crop out that logo at the bottom right there. So I'm just going to crop it like this, and you can choose to either hit the crop tool again or just hit the enter key and it will crop it. Now once it cropped it for me, it zoomed in, so I'm just going to do Control-0 to zoom out. I'm switching to the move tool just so I don't accidentally try to recrop it again. And now I have a good working image, but I still don't have an image that looks that great. My layers are open. I'm going to click this just to make sure I can see my layers. And anytime you do work, it's really good if you work on an additional layer so that you don't mess up your original photo. Right now my background's locked, so that's good. I'm going to talk to you guys about adjustment layers. So if you go to Layer at the top and you go to New Adjustment Layer, you can see that there's some options. You can change the brightness or contrast. You can change levels, you can change curves, which is what we're going to work with. You can even change exposure, the vibrancy, hue, and saturation, which you should remember if you did the Frozen Hands tutorial. Color balance, you can make it black and white. You can do photo filters. There's just a lot you can do. You can invert the photo so that the darks become lights and the lights become dark. There's a lot that you can do. For right now, let's first try exposure, okay? Just click OK, and I'm going to move this over just so you guys can see. Drag it over here on this side, and look what happens if you adjust this exposure. Exposure means that it's actually talking about like the lighting settings on a camera when a picture is taken, okay? So if I actually adjust it this way, it's looking pretty good. You can play around with this a little bit just to kind of see what happens. If you don't like what you've done and you hover over here, you can see that this resets to the adjustment defaults, and this one takes it back to a previous state. So I'm going to click this one to take it all the way back to the beginning, just so we can go back here. And I'm going to get rid of this layer. I'm going to click on my layers and actually get rid of it. I want you to try something else. So that's one way that you can adjust the lighting on a photo that doesn't look good, okay? The next way is to go to Layer, go down to New Adjustment Layer and select Curves. Curves is probably my favorite. This is what I use all the time. And there's a couple things that you can do with curves. So I'll show you what you can do, and then you guys can play around with it and see which one you like. So there's an option for auto. If you click auto, it will do the photo how it thinks it should be done. I don't really like this because it feels like this is too dark for me. So I'm going to reset it back to how it was. And I want to manually adjust it. Now right here, RGB means that, you guys know RGB is the color mode in it, but that means all the colors in the photo. Right here is what's called a histogram. It shows you your brightest spots and your darkest areas in the photo. If you click on it with this line, you can drag it up and down to see what happens to your picture to make it lighter or darker. It kind of adjusts the overall lighting. That looks pretty good. If I wanted to select a certain color, let's say that the ocean just looked not blue enough. I could select the blue and I can drag it up to make it look bluer. I can drag it down to take some of the blue out. Notice, look at the clouds when I do this. Okay, I'm making everything look bluer, but the clouds also look bluer too. If I take it away, the clouds don't quite look right. So you have to play around with it to where you get a good balance, and you can go up in this area and say, okay, well, I'm working with the shadows of it or the light areas of it only, and kind of play with it that way. All right, I'm going to go just to reset it, and you can try it with the same thing with green. You can try adjusting the amount of green that you see, more green, less green. I'm going to reset it. And then I'm just going to go ahead with the RGB and do like kind of an overall brightening of the photo to where I think that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to show you what these do. So this one is the black eyedropper tool, and you click in the image where your darkest area is. So I'm going to click on the black eyedropper tool, and I'm looking for the blackest area. So, you know, at first glance, maybe over here might be the darkest, but then as I look at the woman herself, maybe her eyeglasses or her hair might be. Sometimes this works good, sometimes it doesn't. So it just depends. I'm going to click on her sunglasses, and what it does is it adjusts the rest of the photo to that. I don't like the way that looks, so I'm going to do Control Z for undo. On other photos, sometimes this option will automatically adjust everything and it looks really good, but you have to try it. The middle one is for like your middle gray. If you know that you have a gray tone that you want the rest of the document to be set to, you can choose like this and then pick like a gray area and say, okay, I want all my grays to look this type of shade. So when I clicked on that with my gray, it adjusts it. So I'm saying that that bluish color should be gray, and adjust everything else to warm it up. I'm going to do Control Z to undo. And then this one, you're telling it that this is the white point in my photo. This is the brightest area or the whitest area. So I'm just going to pick what I think is like a particularly white area. And it brightens according to it. So to me in this case, it brightens a little too much, but you can kind of see what it looks like with the waves. I'm going to go ahead and undo all of it, and I'm just going to manually adjust this. And to me, that looks pretty good. Okay, so if I go back to my layers, notice that I have a curves layers here and I have a background layer. I can undo it at any time. I could get rid of it. It doesn't affect the original photo. Okay, so far so good. Next, I want to talk to you about some other tools. So let's go to another photo. Let's go to the busy beach photo, which is right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now, this is not quite the best quality, but it's good enough for us to work with for now. And here we have this beach photo, and let's say I want to get rid of some of these items. So what can I do with that? I think the exposure looks good. I don't want to do curves or adjust anything or change it. But maybe I want to get rid of like this beach pail over here. So I'm going to introduce you to some tools. This tool right here is called the clone tool. And the clone tool, do you see what this is right here? This is because my brush that I chose to be the clone tool looks like that. I just want it to look like a normal, regular circle. So I'm just going to choose this for now. I could make it softer and fuzzier, which might be good. I'll show you the difference between these in just a second. I can choose the hardness of it. I can choose the size of it. Looking at this, when I move my circle over on the picture, I think this is probably a pretty good size. I'm at 34 pixels. That's pretty good. That means it's going to clone 34 pixels onto whatever I pick. All right, so right now I have this beach pail and I would like to match it to the rest of the sand. I want to get rid of this beach pail and I just want to make it look like sand. So I can come over here and I'm on my background layer. Now, if I want to make sure that I don't affect this background layer, I can go ahead and do duplicate layer, and that makes sure that my original is not touched, and I could just get rid of this if I don't like what I did. So I'm going to go over here to the area next to the beach pail, hold down the Alt key, and you see that little sample? That means that little target, that means that you are sampling from here. I'm going to click with my mouse, and now when I come over to the beach pail, before I even click, it gives me a preview of what that's going to look like. That looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to click, and it's cloned that sand right there over. And I'm going to come over this way. Now, if you notice, it's making a pattern right here. Do you see that? You have to be careful with a clone tool that you don't put things in the same place that it would cause a pattern like that. So in this case, if I click it, I can kind of see this like doot, doot, doot. You got to sing it. It makes better sense if you sing it. And I mean, really, you're not going to notice at first glance. But if I wanted to smooth that out some, I could actually come over here and sample, hold down Alt, sample from over here, and just kind of click in the middle of that to break that pattern up. But if you look, you can see that circle as to where I did that. So that's too obvious for me. I don't like that. I'm going to do Control Z and undo it. And let's play around with changing this. Let's make it like fuzzier, softer. It's got a very soft, so notice the hardness is 0%. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. And it also has this weird kind of angle to it as you do it. So I'm going to go over in this area, and I hit escape, by the way, to get that out of the way. Let's say I want to get rid of some of these items around the sandcastle. So I could come over to where this starfish is, and I can, well, I say starfish, but it's a toy. I can hold down Alt key and sample in this area, and then notice that it's a much softer cover-up than the other one. It's got a little bit of a blur to it. It just isn't like a hard sample. This is kind of a nice one to use, especially if you're cloning someone's face or skin and you don't want it to be too harsh or too noticeable. So I'm just going to keep sampling over in this area, clean that up. You have to keep sampling near wherever you're going to clean, because otherwise you're going to get shadows and things that don't make it look realistic. So you have to be careful with what you choose. You know, if I sampled over here, or let's say I sampled on this side of the beach, that's much darker sand than right in this area. So I have to pick sand that matches. And so that's what I'm doing. That looks pretty good. It's not bad. I don't like the soft tool for this because I don't need it to be soft. It's a rough texture, so I can do a hard tool, and I think soft looks a little funny. So in comparison, I just did undo. I'm going to go to Window, History, and I'm going to go back a couple, Clone Tools, and I'm going to change my brush. I'm going to change it to a hard one again. I just prefer one like that. 34 is a pretty good size. And again, I'm going to escape to get out of that. Whoops, it went back to soft for some reason. Here we go. Oh, I guess when you hit escape in this version of Photoshop, it takes it out to soft. All right, here we go. All right, I am going to hold down Alt, and then I can do a hard clone sample. Again, I'm going to choose a couple different things because I don't want it to be a repeat pattern that looks obvious. You have to be careful about that. Otherwise, it's a pretty obvious thing that you're using Photoshop or something else to change something. Okay, so far we're cleaning up our beach pretty nicely. There's still some items over here. I'm going to talk to you about some other things. So this is the healing tool. You've got options. You've got a patch tool, a healing brush tool, a spot healing tool. Really, these are best kind of explained if you're working with someone's face and you're trying to remove acne. If the best way for me to describe this is the healing brush will kind of take samples from all in one area, and the spot just samples from like one little spot. The patch kind of blends things together. So let's try these three and see what you notice, okay? So the clone is an exact replica of whatever you sample. The healing is like a smart feature. It's like the computer, Photoshop is saying, okay, well, you want it to look like this area. This is what it is. I'm going to blend those together. Let's start with just the regular healing brush tool. And so I'm going to increase my size. I right-clicked to increase my size, or you could go up here. And I'm going to come over to this. So I'm going to sample. So I'm going to hold down the Alt and sample here, or I could sample over here too. And when I bring it, what it does is it blends that together. That's not a good option for working on this because we're working with sand, and having the blending of these two where it's kind of a soft blend doesn't really look good. So I'm going to do Control Z. I'm going to switch to spot healing tool. Go a little bit bigger. And again, I'm going to hold down the Alt key. So the spot healing brush tool, it automatically samples pixels. And you just kind of go over top and click it, and it automatically does it without you selecting it. So when you use the healing tool, you have to tell it what you're sampling from. When you use the spot healing tool, it tries to decide for you, which sometimes works, and in this last case, does not work, okay? Okay, I'm going to go back to the clone sample, and I'm going to show you the patch tool. So the patch tool works like this. Let's say that I want to cover up this toy over here. Once I have the patch tool selected, I need to draw a selection of what I want this to be like. Once I've drawn it, I move it over top the object, and then I click on it. And once I click away, Photoshop automatically tries to blend those together. So it did an okay job, not a fantastic job, because you've got this yellow beach tool over here, so you've kind of got that in your way, but that's how the patch tool works. Probably my favorite for a picture like this would just be the clone tool. I definitely love the healing brush and all of these, but I think that I like, with the sand and with what we're working with, I like just using the clone tool. So I'm going to go back in my history to clone tool and go ahead and clean the rest of this area up. You can either decide to get rid of this whole sandcastle or just clean the toys up. I'm going to start up here, and I'm just going to give these toys a little cleanup job. And I can see a pattern over there that I don't want, so I'm just going to be careful to get rid of that. I'm going to come over here and clean this area up. Okay. So just take your time, go through it, clean it up, sample some areas, see what you can do. Can you make it look nice and clean? And you probably can. Okay, by the way, did anybody notice what it is that they're making in this? I just did pick up on it as I zoomed in. I believe they are making a snowman. See the snowman hat and the eyes? Okay. All right, so now we have the sandcastle cleaned up. We've got a pretty nice picture, and you guys should have a good idea on how the clone tool and the healing tools work. Let's go over to the beach umbrella. Okay, in this picture, we're going to start with a crop tool. We are going to crop out to about right there, get rid of all the rest of this. Go ahead and hit enter. Notice that we've got this copyright on here. Go ahead and take some time and try to get rid of the copyright that you see in these areas. So use your tools that you learned, either cloning tool. I'm going to go ahead and do the spot healing tool and see if that will work. I'm going to go a little bit bigger. Sometimes you just have to play around with it till you get something that works right. Yep, spot healing tool works pretty good. It cleans it right up. And you can swipe too, like that. You just have to be careful that as you're doing this, you're paying attention to make sure that you're not, adding a pattern or adding anything that doesn't look natural. Oops. So far, so good. Switch over here. Swipe in the sky, getting rid of all these copyright icons. Okay, now I want to show you a couple more things. So I got rid of the main stuff around the umbrella. I'm actually going to cut the umbrella out and we're going to move it over to the other picture in just a minute, but I just wanted to show you some things that you can do. So there are tools under here. You've got the blur tool, the sharpen tool, the smudge tool, and then you've got these tools called dodge and burn and sponge, and I want to show you what they do. Let's start with the dodge tool. So I should have told you this ahead of time to make a duplicate layer. I forgot, but that's okay. At this point, just go ahead, click and make duplicate layer. Okay. By the way, the difference between new layer and duplicate layer is that duplicate makes a copy of the layer underneath of it, and new layer just makes a completely blank layer. All right, so now if you hover, it'll tell you we are on the dodge tool. So let's go ahead and make it a larger size. I want you to see what the dodge tool does. If you go ahead and click on this, notice that where you use it, it gets lighter. Can you guys see that? It's very subtle, but the more times I use it again and again, it lightens the area where I am. I'm going to go back to the window and I'm going to pull up my history and I'm going to go back. Okay. Now let's change it from the dodge tool to the burn tool. Let's say that we wanted to add a little shadow in here to our picture. Well, we can do that. I'm going to make it a size that I want. And the hover over it, it'll tell you the burn tool darkens an area. So if we wanted to add a little shadow, say the sun's coming in this way and we're getting this late afternoon shadow in the sand, we could go ahead and darken this area and give the illusion that there's a shadow over here. You could go as dark as you want. This is obviously way too fake, too dark of it, but you could play around with it, okay? I'm going to take it back all the way to the beginning, and I'm going to switch to the sponge tool. All right, and the sponge tool allows you to desaturate or saturate a picture, depending on what you want to do. So you can choose your brush and your size. I'm going to make it large. We're just playing. I just want you guys to be able to see it. Let's go ahead and choose desaturate, and we're going to do it on top of the umbrella so you can really get a good idea for it. So as you color, it basically desaturates it by taking out the color. So you notice that it's really taken that bright red and darkened it. So it's actually making it more black and white. The flow is down to 50%. If I brought that up to 100%, you could really see it turns it into like a grayscale or a black and white. I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to put my flow way back down because I think 100% is too strong for a tool like this. But this is a way that you could also come in and add a little shadow here and there if you wanted to. All right, the other option is to change it to saturate, and you can see what saturate does. So if I go ahead and go over the same area, it makes it more vibrant it adds more of that color to it. If I do it in the ocean, you can kind of see it takes it up a notch. So it's a way of brightening part of your image. If you don't want to do a whole layer and brighten everything, you can come in, use the sponge tool, and saturate it so it's really bright. Look at the difference between that. If I go back to the beginning over here, that's what it was, and that's what it is. Much brighter, so you get just choose between saturate and desaturate. So it's just a way to brighten something if you want to brighten a particular spot, or a way to darken something if you want to darken another spot. Okay, I'm going to take this in my history. Well, I could either go back in the history or just get rid of my layer. I'm just going to get rid of my duplicate layer and get this out of the way, and I'm going to select the magnetic lasso. I'm going to go ahead and cut out my umbrella. And we are going to drag this into another photo. Okay, here we have our umbrella. Let's drag it into our underexposed beach photo. Pick it up, drag it over. Here we've got this umbrella. Now obviously this umbrella is way too bright and pretty big for where we are. Let's say we want to get rid of our lady over here. So here's your challenge, guys. I want you to use your tools, get rid of this nice lady who's sitting right here. I want you to make this umbrella look a little bit better. So you may want to transform and scale it so that it's a little bit smaller and doesn't look so funky, sitting so much bigger in the ocean. And I'm going to hit enter. Make it match the background, so you probably either want to do an adjustment layer on this and change your brightness. You may want to use the sponge tool and desaturate it a little bit. And then I want you to use the clone tools and the healing brush tool. Get rid of this lady as best as you can. No offense to her, we just want just a beach shot without her. And I would like to see what you end up with in the end. So show me for this underexposed beach photo, show me how to get rid of her, show me what happens if you clone her out of the picture. Bring your umbrella over, go ahead and adjust it so that it looks better. Add a little bit, it's a bright sunlight right now, but add a little bit of shadow with your tools that you're doing. You know, go ahead and play with it a little bit. Whoops. Go ahead and play with it a little bit so that you end up with this picture adjusted correctly, her out of it, bring an umbrella over, make it fit the lighting a little bit better, and see what you can come up with. Save it and turn it in when you're done with it through Google Classrooms under the link that I give you. All right, that's it. Hope that you have fun with this, play around with it, get to learn it. Let me know what questions